I'm Josie and I'm a writer, and if this is the first video you're seeing from me, I am just starting the process of writing my next thriller novel. I have a previous video where I talked about like who I am and where I am in, the stage of my life writing wise. So you can check that out if you want. If not, we're gonna just jump right in today with the outlining process. As you can tell from the title of this video, I'm gonna try and combine 3 different outlining methods that have worked for me in the past, and we're gonna see if we can get different gems out of each one and then combine them together to produce a stronger story. We're using 3 different methods from 3 different places. The first is the 3-act story structure, and I'm taking the one developed by Abby Emmons here on YouTube, and I'll link her below. It's a way to make your story very character driven because it's the changes in the character that's really driving the inflection points of the story, of the narrative. So I'm going to start with that, and that's again kind of like the classic inciting incident, I don't know them off the top of my head, but like pinch point up into the second act, midpoint, third act, resolution, all that kind of stuff. And she's got really handy worksheets that I'll be going through where she asks questions relating to how your character's changing in each of those moments. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to do the thriller beats. Those were created by Alexa Dunn, also on YouTube. So I'll link her video below where she talks about it. And I've used it in the past for some of my kind of more whodunit mysteries. And that's really to make sure that the readers that will eventually, hopefully, read my story are getting those points, those in a thriller that they're expecting, right? So I'm setting up that expectation when I'm saying this is a thriller, and I want to make sure I hit on all of those things later on when it's being read. So first is making sure it's character driven. Second, making sure I'm hitting the thriller points. And then the third plotting method is using this idea of promise of the premise that Brandon Sanderson talks a lot about. Sanderson is a very popular fantasy author, and he has videos online of him teaching a writing class at BYU. And I'll link whichever video is talking about this below. But basically, he talks about how when you choose a premise or when you choose archetypes or anything like that, you're innately making a promise to the reader. So this is kind of coming back to this whole thriller beats aspect as well of, if I'm saying that my thriller is going to be a mountaineering thriller, there are certain expectations that might be set by making that claim. If I was a reader picking up a mountaineering thriller book or any book set with mountaineering, I would expect to see scenes traversing glaciers, summiting the mountain, dealing with, the cold or other environmental factors. Just think of a classic mountaineering story or book or whatever, especially if there's a disaster element because I'm doing a thriller. What are those things that people are expecting? Then you think about characters, and then if you've got, a cop character, they're going to be questioning things. They're going to probably be pretty insightful and notice things that other people might not. If you have a romance going on, which I'm still debating, I want a romance to happen, but if it is, you got to make sure you hit those beats that a romance reader might expect, right? Of like banter, getting together, how fast or slow that may be, kind of tying that up as well. So I'm going to be going through all of those things one after another, starting with the 3-act story structure. And yeah, I'll check in as I go through it, and then we'll see where I end up. And just before I start, if you followed my other video, I'm going straight into outlining. I don't do much character work before outlining. I honestly don't do much character work at all. A lot of it's done as well through this 3-act story structure because it's so character driven for my main character. But I don't really I kind of let the outlining and what needs to happen dictate other characters around the main protagonist and kind of let them develop on their own. And I really don't have a clear idea of the characters until I start writing them. It's really hard for me to know like their voice and how they act in certain situations until I've had that experience. Yeah, just thought I'd mention that. So let's get to the 3-act story structure.
So this is our first update for the 3-act story structure. I've started by putting all of the plot beats into a Scrivener document, and then over the last day I've put in like a sentence or two for each of those points. And the first act was pretty easy because before I even really start, outlining something like this, I've already got a pretty good idea. I've thought of a lot of the setup. But what I've struggled with is Act 2 because I do know how I want it to ramp up, and that was easy to go through. And to some extent, I know how I want it to finish, and not just finish, but kind of derail, like from the derailing point. I know how everything's kind of gonna get worse, climax, how it's gonna get fixed, but it's this middle chunk that I really struggle with because I'm debating, there's this one big moment. I don't know whether I want it to come at the midpoint or in the beginning of like the third act or the end of the second act. We've got the midpoint, which is like in the midpoint of your story, right? You need this big, not necessarily a plot twist, but in thrillers, people are expecting a plot twist, but it does have to be some sort of reversal, change the game, change your character. So it would fit well there, but what I'm worried about is that it comes too early. I kind of have like the ramp up, the beginning, and then they're gonna be doing stuff, and then I know the derailment, and then it finishes. So I don't know if that middle section needs to be extended or not, because the next beat after the midpoint is the second pinch point. So I don't know if it would fit really there at all, because the second pinch point's more, I feel like, I don't know, bad guy closing in kind of vibes. Or I could do the third plot point, or even the climax. I'm struggling. But maybe I could add a second pinch point before the midpoint. I don't know if that's like legal. I'll keep thinking about it, but I feel like I just also need to write it. This is why I plot. Like at the beginning when I first started writing, I would not plot at all. I would just write and see where it takes me. The second act has always been my downfall because things would never really progress very quickly on edits and rewrites. I'd close that gap, but this is the reason why I plot. So maybe the midpoint is where it should be and everything will be okay. So I've been thinking a lot more about my whole midpoint issue, and I think I've come to the conclusion that I'm just going to leave it as is, and we're just going to write it and see whether or not it is at the wrong spot and I need to add more stuff before or after. Because I think it's always better to underwrite or underplot and then fill in the gaps later. And I've also started a list of flashbacks that I'm interested in adding into the story to offer a lot more insight into my character and how they came to be who they are, especially at the beginning of the story, because they have a very strong opinion of a certain thing. So I think sprinkling in those flashbacks, I can use that to flesh out whatever section of the story might be lacking. Though I really do want a lot of those flashbacks to occur as you go up to the midpoint, because it'll give a lot more insight to the midpoint and maybe offer more like emotional impact at that point. That's the plan. But now that I've got that out of the way, I've thought a lot more about my ending. I'm using, again, that same basic 3-act story structure, but I have been debating whether or not to make my ending a tragedy, because the character is not a great person, and I don't know whether or not I want her to, basically be punished at the end, like she learns her lesson, but is it too late, or is she still redeemable? And I don't really know. I've plotted it first
now with that ending of more of a tragedy, but maybe it would make more sense for this character to be irredeemable, or that they learn their mistakes too late to fix anything. But I like happy endings, and I don't really want to spend however long, months, a year, whatever it's going to take to write this story and not have an ending that I like. So it might, I don't know, it might make more sense to make it a tragedy. It might play into the themes a bit better, but I feel like I can't make it a tragedy for my own sake. I mean, who knows? Either way, if I lead tragedy or redemption, the whole way there will be very, very similar. It's whether or not I kind of change potentially that last 10%. So, yeah, I don't know. And it's not really going to change a lot of the outlining that I'm planning on doing, even with the other two types I'm going to do next. It's just something I'm going to keep in the back of my head. Yeah, I might not give you guys, well, you can see where I'm leaning now, but if I do change my mind and decide to take a risk, I might not say on here just because I want it to stay surprising if the story ends up going anywhere and you guys end up reading it. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I think I'm happy with how the 3-act story structure has gone, and I can always come back to it because one of my favorite ways of outlining when using different methods is that you can always go back and forth between them. Like as I'm doing the next 2 steps, I might come up with ideas that fit better in this outline. I'll go back and like add a few things or change a few things and then back and forth. Nothing's concrete, nothing's set in stone, but I think it's time to move on to the Thriller Beats by Alexa Dunn. Okay, as you can see, I decided to go on a walk to clear my mind because the Thriller Beats are not going as easy as I thought they would. In the past, they've been really, really helpful because I've had stories that center around an investigation. That's really what these Thriller Beats are meant for. Whereas the story I'm writing now, this mountaineering thriller, doesn't really have much of a mystery in it. Like you're let in pretty early on what's going on. There are reveals, plot twists, whatever you want to call them, but they're not part of an investigation by the main character. There is an investigation in the story by a different character, and the main character gets implicated in that. But I don't really want to focus too much on that because then I feel like the story will pivot away from what I really want it to be. So I'm trying to sort through the Thriller Beats and decide which ones I want to keep and which one I want to throw away, because a lot of them are really helpful. The Thriller Beats follow the 3-act story structure, kind of, but modifies them to reflect, a thriller story. So a discovery of something going on, investigations, red herrings, that sort of thing. So especially earlier on, I found it useful, and as well at the end, I found it useful. Timing reveals, timing bad guy encounters, confrontations, that sort of thing. And I also really like it because the Thriller Beats, the last one, is a micro twist. It's the idea of adding something potentially in like the last chapter that kind of turns a lot of what you've already read on its head. So I like that. I want to do that. We'll see if I can pull it off. But I'm really going to have to decide what to keep and what not to keep when it comes to a lot of the stuff in the middle, which is kind of frustrating because in the 3-act story structure that I did, the middle was also what was giving me the most trouble. So it looks like this is just going to have to be a discovery right during the drafting process, and fingers crossed it all works out. And I'm going to be doing a more structured outline after this once I've got all these things done and I've done as well some research. But a little discouraging about the Thriller Beats. I'm going to finish my walk, think about it a bit more, give you some concluding thoughts before I move on to the last one, which should be a lot more straightforward, a lot easier. So I just got back from my walk. It was really nice. It's turned into a really nice day. I don't know if you can see, but there's some blue sky. It was raining earlier. And before I go inside, I really wanted to reflect on some of what I was thinking about relating to my frustration with Act 2. The thriller beats, it not really working, is kind of adding to that because I thought I had the perfect plan. I've used the thriller beats before, I've used the 3 act structure before, and this promise of the premise stuff. And it's worked before. Last year, actually, for NaNoWriMo, I did a full chapter by chapter outline starting from these outlines. And it went so well last year. I finished NaNoWriMo, I think, in like 17 or 18 days. It went so fast, and the writing itself was, at least I think, pretty clean. None of the scenes I wrote were scrapped. If anything, in my revisions since then, I've added to the scenes and made them a bit longer, but it's held very true to what it was in that first draft that I did. I'm frustrated because it's, at least at the start, and I'm not giving myself enough patience with this, but at least at the start, it's not feeling as easy. And I don't know why last year was so easy, if it was just a one-off, that project, something about it just clicked. But that doesn't mean that this isn't gonna work. I have been putting off this book for so long. If you've watched my previous video, I have written in the past 4 years 4 thriller mystery books. And I intended the third one that I write, so the one kind of in the middle of those 4, to be this one. It's the idea I thought was going to be my best idea. I was so excited by it. I thought it was a high concept while still being, very character driven, very interesting. And I put it off because the research bit intimidated me, because I don't know a lot about mountaineering, and I just hate the idea of being considered a fraud, or people thinking that I don't know what I'm talking about, and wasting that much time on a book to get that reaction is what I'm scared of. Mountaineering, which is, the setting for this book, plays such a huge role in the story. They're literally mountaineering, and if I get something super pivotal wrong about how the process works, how an approach of a mountain works, I feel like it'll derail a lot of the story. And this is why Act 2 is so scary, because the first act is all the setup. It's meeting characters. It's bringing a group together. It's going to this place, meeting other contestants. It's all stuff that I feel so comfortable with, but as soon as Act 2 starts, that's when the adventure begins, when the mountaineering starts. And the fact that this plotting, I'm struggling with it, feels like it's just foreshadowing struggling during NaNoWriMo. But at the same time, I'm super grateful for NaNoWriMo. I'm a month and a half out. I've got so much time. And even if I didn't, NaNoWriMo forces you to just push through a story. And that's what I think makes it so useful. It's why I've never been able to do Camp NaNoWriMo. I've tried to do it both April and July. I've tried to do it a number of times in the past, but I feel like I've never accomplished it because it's never felt official. I've never fully committed to it. Whereas for the November one, there's such a push behind it. So many people are doing it. You look forward to it for so long that when you sit down to write, you just have to put something on the page. And so hopefully a few weeks in, when I get past Act 1 and I'm writing Act 2, I feel like I have somewhere to go. Because my biggest fear is I'm gonna be basically paralyzed and not know what to do and where to take things. Which won't happen. I know it won't. I'm going to do the research. I'm going to keep working on this outline. I'm going to try building a chapter by chapter outline closer to the date. And it's all going to work out, but it's just the frustration and the worries are all part of the process, and they suck every time, especially coming after having written a book that felt just so easy, and I was hoping so much that that was the way it would always be, that I'd finally crack the code. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So it's fine. Some of the thriller beats I think are useful, and I'm going to incorporate them. Some I'm just going to have to delete, and that's fine. And I'm looking forward to the third outlining, the promise of the premise, because I feel like that's a bit where you get to let yourself be creative, just what would be really cool to have in a story. And I hope that that brings back some of my excitement for this story, really what inspired me to do this to begin with, because back in, 2022, I was so excited to write this. I thought I had the best idea ever, and it's this mountaineering knowledge that's really held me back. And so hopefully doing this third outlining will help me and abate some of my frustration. I've just sat down to start doing the third outlining method, our promise of the premise. Koali's just about to join me, my cat, which will be nice. And then I've also decided to make this as cozy as possible. So I have a little banana bread, and I've just steeping some Earl Grey tea. So I've got everything I need, and we're gonna try and stay positive and come up with some fun, creative ideas. All the things that I would love to see in this story. So I've taken a break from writing out my promise of the premise, and I don't really know if you can say this is a break because I've kind of spent the last 2 hours staring at my computer, sort of working, not really. It's a Monday night. I feel like I'm just exhausted, not only from a lot of lab work today, but as well just trying to figure out this story and all of the mental gymnastics that come along with it. Like, I know I'm probably acting a little melodramatic about Act 2, and it'll be fine. I'm feeling optimistic, but I don't know that I can truly finish the promise of the premise stuff until I've done some research, just in case there's more ideas that come to me when thinking about themes and common threads that come up in mountaineering. What do I mean by that? A lot of mountaineering is person versus the mountain. There's aspects of what are you giving up to take on such a dangerous hobby, because mountaineering is not safe. How do people that enjoy this sport, what's going on in their heads when they're making these decisions? What are their priorities? That sort of thing. And I'm not a mountaineer, so I can only imagine what they're really like. And so by reading fiction, nonfiction, watching documentaries and movies, I think I'll get a better understanding of this and if there's anything I'm missing. So even though I want this to be a complete, discrete video all about outlining using these 3 methods, it is a bit of a messy process, at least for me, and there will be a bit of back and forth. But this isn't the end of outlining. My plan is to research next, which will probably take a bit, and then to come back to these outlines, combine them together into a chapter by chapter breakdown, or at least section by section. That's the plan. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it wasn't just a confusing mess and you got something out of it. I am feeling good. The takeaway is we're making progress. It's not always easy and direct, but we're getting there. And I still have over a month before NaNoWriMo starts. I'm honestly excited to just read some books and watch some movies and call it part of my writing process. So, see you next time.